Question 1. Market research demonstrates a growing interest among residents of neighboring states in obtaining a concealed weapon permit in Arizona. A resident of Nevada, who holds a valid concealed weapon permit from their home state, wishes to apply for a non-resident permit in Arizona. What is the most prudent course of action for this individual to ensure compliance with Arizona law? Option A. Assume that because Nevada has a concealed weapon permit, training and requirements met for that permit are automatically sufficient for an Arizona non-resident permit, and proceed with submitting the Nevada permit as proof of training. Option B. Contact the Arizona Department of Public Safety and request a waiver for the standard training requirements, citing the possession of a valid permit from another state as sufficient qualification. Option C. Thoroughly review Arizona Revised Statutes Title 13, Chapter 31, specifically ARS, Section 13-3112, to understand the eligibility requirements for non-resident concealed weapon permits, including any specific training or reciprocity provisions applicable to Nevada residents, and ensure all documentation meets these precise criteria. Option D. Rely on general advice from online forums and discussions about concealed carry laws in Arizona, believing that common practices across states will apply without needing to verify specific Arizona statutes. Correct answer is C. Thoroughly review Arizona Revised Statutes Title 13, Chapter 31, specifically ARS, Section 13-3112, to understand the eligibility requirements for non-resident concealed weapon permits, including any specific training or reciprocity provisions applicable to Nevada residents, and ensure all documentation meets these precise criteria. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a non-resident applicant to navigate Arizona's specific concealed weapon permit requirements, which differ from their home state's regulations. The applicant must ensure they meet all statutory prerequisites for a non-resident permit, including understanding the reciprocity agreements and the specific criteria Arizona law imposes on out-of-state applicants. Careful judgment is required to avoid misinterpreting the law, which could lead to a denied application or, worse, legal repercussions. The best professional approach involves thoroughly researching Arizona Revised Statutes, ARS, Title 13, Chapter 31, specifically focusing on the provisions governing concealed weapon permits for non-residents. This includes verifying if Arizona has a reciprocity agreement with the applicant's home state and understanding the specific training requirements mandated by Arizona law for non-residents, which may differ from their home state's training. The applicant must also confirm they meet all other eligibility criteria outlined in ARS, Section 13-3112, such as age, residency, and the absence of disqualifying criminal convictions. Adhering strictly to these statutory requirements ensures the application is compliant and maximizes the likelihood of approval. An incorrect approach would be to assume that the training and requirements from the applicant's home state are automatically sufficient for an Arizona permit. Arizona law, as detailed in ARS, Section 13-3112A6, requires that a non-resident applicant demonstrate completion of a firearms safety or training course that is recognized by Arizona. Simply having a permit from another state does not automatically satisfy this requirement if the training received does not meet Arizona's standards. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on general online information or advice from individuals not specifically knowledgeable about Arizona's non-resident permit laws, potentially leading to the submission of incomplete or inaccurate documentation. This failure to consult the specific statutory language and official guidance from Arizona law enforcement agencies constitutes a significant regulatory oversight. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes statutory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the specific jurisdiction's laws governing the permit Arizona Revised Statutes. 2. Determining the applicant's status non-resident. 3. Researching all statutory requirements applicable to that status, including training, reciprocity, and eligibility criteria. 4. Verifying all information against official sources, e.g., Arizona Department of Public Safety. 5. Submitting an application that meticulously addresses each statutory requirement. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that an individual residing in Nevada wishes to obtain a concealed weapon permit recognized in Arizona. What is the most appropriate course of action for an advisor to recommend to this Nevada resident seeking to legally carry a concealed weapon in Arizona? Option A. Inform the applicant that obtaining an Arizona non-resident permit automatically grants them the right to carry a concealed weapon in all other states. Option B. Recommend that the applicant rely on their valid Nevada concealed weapon permit, as it is likely to be recognized in Arizona due to reciprocity agreements. Option C. Suggest that the applicant take any general firearms safety course available online, as this will satisfy Arizona's training requirements for non-residents. Option D. Advise the applicant to complete the official Arizona Department of Public Safety application for a non-resident concealed weapon permit, ensuring they meet all eligibility criteria and complete an Arizona-approved firearms safety course. The correct answer is D. Advise the applicant to complete the official Arizona Department of Public Safety application for a non-resident concealed weapon permit, ensuring they meet all eligibility criteria and complete an Arizona-approved firearms safety course. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a thorough understanding of Arizona's specific legal framework for non-resident concealed weapon permits, particularly the nuances of reciprocity and the application process. Misinterpreting these requirements can lead to an invalid permit, potential legal repercussions for the applicant, and professional liability for the advisor. Careful judgment is required to ensure the applicant receives accurate and legally sound guidance. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously guiding the applicant through the Arizona Department of Public Safety's official application process for a non-resident permit. This includes ensuring the applicant meets all eligibility criteria as outlined in Arizona Revised Statutes, A.R.S. Section 13-3112, such as being at least 21 years of age, not being prohibited from possessing a firearm under state or federal law, and completing a firearms safety course that meets Arizona's specific requirements. The advisor must also confirm the applicant understands that the permit is issued by Arizona and does not automatically grant reciprocity in other states. The applicant is responsible for understanding the laws of any other state where they intend to carry a concealed weapon. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to Arizona's statutory requirements for obtaining a non-resident concealed weapon permit, ensuring the applicant is pursuing a legally valid authorization. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves advising the applicant to rely solely on a concealed weapon permit obtained from their home state, assuming it will be automatically recognized in Arizona. This is a regulatory failure because Arizona law, specifically ARS Section 13-3112, outlines a distinct application process for non-residents seeking an Arizona permit. While Arizona may have reciprocity agreements with other states, this does not negate the need for a non-resident to follow Arizona's specific application procedures if they wish to obtain an Arizona permit. Another incorrect approach is to suggest that completing any firearms safety course, regardless of its origin or curriculum, will satisfy Arizona's requirements. This is an ethical and regulatory failure because A.R.S. Section 13-3112 specifies that the firearms safety course must be one that is approved by the Arizona Department of Public Safety or meets specific criteria outlined in the statute. A generic or unapproved course would not be sufficient. A further incorrect approach is to advise the applicant that obtaining an Arizona non-resident permit automatically allows them to carry a concealed weapon in all other states. This is a significant legal and ethical misrepresentation. While an Arizona permit may be recognized in some other states due to reciprocity agreements, the responsibility for understanding and complying with the laws of each individual state rests solely with the permit holder. The advisor has a duty to provide accurate information regarding the scope and limitations of the permit. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach when advising clients on firearm permits. This involves 1. Identifying the specific jurisdiction's laws governing the permit sought, in this case, Arizona. 2. Thoroughly researching the statutory requirements for that permit, including eligibility, application procedures, and required documentation. 3. Clearly communicating these requirements to the applicant, emphasizing any distinctions for non-residents. 4. Educating the applicant about the limitations of the permit, particularly regarding reciprocity with other states. 5. encouraging the applicant to consult official sources, such as the relevant state agency's website, for the most up-to-date information. Question 3. Market research demonstrates that many individuals seek non-resident concealed weapon permits in Arizona. When evaluating an application for an Arizona non-resident concealed weapon permit from an applicant residing in Nevada, what is the most prudent course of action to ensure full compliance with Arizona revised statutes? Option A. Assume that a valid concealed weapon permit issued by the state of Nevada automatically grants reciprocity and eligibility for an Arizona non-resident permit. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history, verifying their home state's permit status, and ensuring they meet all Arizona statutory requirements for non-resident applicants, including completion of an approved firearms safety course. Option C. Overlook any past misdemeanor convictions reported by the applicant, as these are generally not considered disqualifying for concealed weapon permits in Arizona. Option D. Focus primarily on the applicant's stated intent for carrying a concealed weapon and accept their self-reported criminal history without independent verification. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history, verifying their home state's permit status, and ensuring they meet all Arizona statutory requirements for non-resident applicants, including completion of an approved firearms safety course. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of Arizona's specific requirements for non-resident concealed weapon permits, particularly when dealing with individuals who may have prior legal entanglements. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with Arizona revised statutes, ARS, and to avoid misinterpreting or misapplying the law, which could lead to the denial of a legitimate application or, worse, the issuance of a permit to an unqualified individual. The best professional approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history, specifically looking for any disqualifying convictions or conditions as outlined in ARS. Section 13-3112. This includes verifying that the applicant meets all residency requirements. Even as a non-resident, certain criteria apply regarding their home state's laws and reciprocity, and that they have successfully completed a firearms safety course that meets Arizona's standards. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the statutory requirements for obtaining a non-resident concealed weapon permit in Arizona, ensuring that all legal prerequisites are met before any recommendation or decision is made. It prioritizes adherence to the letter and spirit of the law, safeguarding public safety, while respecting the rights of eligible individuals. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a valid concealed weapon permit from another state automatically qualifies an applicant for reciprocity in Arizona without further verification. This fails to acknowledge that Arizona has its own specific criteria for non-resident permits, and while reciprocity exists, it is not a blanket acceptance. The regulatory failure lies in bypassing the statutory requirements for non-resident applicants, potentially overlooking disqualifying factors that might be present in their home state's record or that are independently disqualifying under Arizona law. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook or downplay any past misdemeanor convictions, believing they are too minor to affect eligibility for a concealed weapon permit. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Arizona law, as detailed in ARS. Section 13-3112, specifically lists certain misdemeanor convictions as disqualifying offenses for a period of time, and failing to investigate these thoroughly is a direct violation of the statute. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the public safety mandate inherent in the permitting process. A final incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the applicant's self-reporting of their criminal history without independent verification. While applicants are required to disclose their history, the responsibility of the permitting authority is to verify this information through official channels. This approach is professionally unsound because it places undue trust in the applicant and fails to fulfill the statutory obligation to conduct a thorough background check, which is a cornerstone of responsible firearm permitting. A professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic checklist approach based on the relevant statutes. First, confirm the applicant's eligibility based on their home state's laws and Arizona's reciprocity agreements. Second, conduct a comprehensive background check, meticulously reviewing all criminal history, including any arrests, charges, and convictions, comparing them against the disqualifying criteria in RS. Section 13-3112. Third, verify completion of an approved firearms safety course. Finally, ensure all application documentation is complete and accurate before making a determination. This structured process minimizes the risk of error and ensures consistent, lawful application of the permit requirements. Question 4. What factors determine the eligibility of a non-resident applicant for an Arizona concealed weapons permit, considering the specific statutory framework of Arizona revised statutes? Option A. The existence of any reciprocity agreement between Arizona and the applicant's home state, without considering the applicant's individual eligibility under their home state's laws. Option B. The applicant's valid concealed weapon permit from their state of residence, confirmation of their eligibility to carry a concealed weapon in their home state, and adherence to all other Arizona statutory requirements for permit issuance. Option C. The applicant's sworn statement that they are legally allowed to carry a concealed weapon in their home state, without independent verification of their home state's laws or permit status. Option D. The applicant's possession of a valid firearm and a general understanding of firearm safety, regardless of their home state's permit status. Correct answer is B. The applicant's valid concealed weapon permit from their state of residence, confirmation of their eligibility to carry a concealed weapon in their home state, and adherence to all other Arizona statutory requirements for permit issuance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an Arizona concealed weapons permit instructor due to the nuanced requirements for non-resident applicants. The instructor must navigate the specific provisions of Arizona revised statutes, RS, related to concealed carry permits for individuals who do not reside in Arizona, ensuring compliance with both state law and federal regulations concerning firearm possession and interstate recognition of permits. The core difficulty lies in accurately assessing whether a non-resident applicant meets the criteria for a permit, which often involves verifying their eligibility under their home state's laws and understanding how Arizona's reciprocity agreements function. The best approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's documentation against the specific requirements outlined in ARS Title 13, Chapter 31, specifically focusing on ARS Section 13-3112, which governs concealed weapon permits for non-residents. This includes verifying that the applicant is legally permitted to carry a concealed weapon in their state of residence, and that their home state has a reciprocity agreement with Arizona that allows for the recognition of their permit or the issuance of an Arizona permit to a non-resident. The instructor must also ensure the applicant meets all other eligibility criteria stipulated by Arizona law, such as age, and the absence of disqualifying criminal convictions. This meticulous adherence to statutory requirements is paramount for lawful and safe firearm administration. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a valid concealed carry permit from another state automatically qualifies an applicant for an Arizona permit without further verification. This fails to acknowledge that Arizona's reciprocity agreements are specific and may not cover all states or all types of permits. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the applicant's self-attestation of eligibility without independently verifying their status in their home state, which bypasses crucial due diligence and could lead to the issuance of a permit to an unqualified individual. Furthermore, misinterpreting the scope of federal law, such as the Gun Control Act of 1968, in relation to Arizona's specific permit requirements for non-residents, would also constitute a regulatory failure. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes statutory compliance and thorough verification. This involves understanding the specific legal framework of Arizona concerning concealed carry for non-residents, meticulously reviewing all submitted documentation, cross-referencing information with relevant state and federal databases where permissible, and consulting with legal counsel or regulatory bodies if any ambiguity arises regarding an applicant's eligibility or the interpretation of reciprocity agreements. Question 5. The audit findings indicate a potential oversight in processing applications for non-resident concealed weapon permits in Arizona. Specifically, an applicant presented a valid concealed weapon permit from another state, which was approved for reciprocity without a detailed review of the issuing state's training requirements against Arizona's standards. Which of the following approaches best reflects the necessary due diligence for Arizona concealed weapon permit reciprocity? Option A. automatically grant reciprocity for any valid concealed weapon permit issued by another state, assuming their training standards are comparable to Arizona's. Option B. Verify that the applicant's out-of-state permit is valid and that the applicant meets Arizona's age and residency requirements, while also confirming the issuing state's firearms safety training is substantially equivalent to Arizona's requirements as stipulated by Arizona revised statutes. Option C. Deny reciprocity to all non-resident applicants, regardless of their permit's validity or their home state's training standards, as Arizona law prioritizes resident permit holders. Option D. Accept the applicant's self-attestation of completing a firearms safety course without independently verifying its content or comparing it to Arizona's training mandates. The correct answer is B. Verify that the applicant's out-of-state permit is valid and that the applicant meets Arizona's age and residency requirements, while also confirming the issuing state's firearms safety training is substantially equivalent to Arizona's requirements as stipulated by Arizona revised statutes. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential lapse in due diligence regarding the verification of out-of-state concealed weapon permit holders seeking reciprocity in Arizona. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of Arizona revised statutes, ARS, related to concealed carry, and the specific requirements for recognizing permits from other states, balancing security concerns with the rights of lawful permit holders. A failure to adhere to these statutes can have significant legal and public safety implications. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's out-of-state permit against the criteria established by ARS Section 13-3112. This statute outlines the conditions under which Arizona recognizes concealed weapon permits issued by other states. Specifically, it requires that the issuing state's permit be valid, that the applicant meet Arizona's age and residency requirements, or be a non-resident meeting specific criteria, and that the applicant has successfully completed a firearms safety or training course that is substantially equivalent to Arizona's requirements. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the statutory framework governing reciprocity, ensuring that only individuals who meet Arizona's established standards for responsible firearm ownership are granted the privilege of carrying concealed weapons within the state. It prioritizes legal compliance and public safety by adhering to the established legislative intent. An incorrect approach would be to assume that any valid permit from another state automatically grants reciprocity in Arizona. This fails to acknowledge ARS Section 13-3112 mandate for verifying that the issuing state's requirements are substantially equivalent to Arizona's. This oversight could lead to individuals who do not meet Arizona's safety or training standards being granted concealed carry privileges, posing a potential risk to public safety and violating the spirit and letter of Arizona law. Another incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the applicant's self-certification of completing a firearms safety course without any independent verification or comparison to Arizona's standards. While ARS Section 13-3112 requires such a course, it also implies a need for the course to be substantially equivalent. Without verification, the auditor cannot confirm this equivalence, potentially allowing individuals with inadequate training to carry concealed weapons. This approach neglects the due diligence required by the statute. A third incorrect approach would be to deny reciprocity based on the applicant's out-of-state status alone, without considering the specific provisions within ARS Section 13-3112 that allow for non-resident permit recognition. This is overly restrictive and fails to implement the reciprocity provisions as intended by the legislature. It would unfairly penalize individuals who have met the requirements of their home state and are otherwise eligible under Arizona law. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the relevant statutes and regulations. In this case, ARS Section 13-3112. They must then meticulously compare the applicant's documentation and qualifications against each specific requirement outlined in the law. This involves not just checking for the existence of a permit, but also verifying the issuing state's training standards and ensuring the applicant meets Arizona's age and other eligibility criteria. When in doubt about the substantial equivalence of training, seeking clarification from the Arizona Department of Public Safety or consulting legal counsel specializing in firearms law would be prudent. This systematic, legally grounded approach ensures compliance and upholds public safety. Question 6. A client who is a resident of Nevada and holds a valid concealed weapon permit issued by the state of Nevada wishes to carry a concealed weapon in Arizona. What is the most appropriate course of action for advising this client regarding Arizona's concealed weapon permit requirements for non-residents? Option A. Advise the client to apply for an Arizona resident concealed weapon permit, as it is a more straightforward process and will cover their needs. Option B. Advise the client to confirm if their Nevada concealed weapon permit is recognized by Arizona under ARS Section 13-3112, and if so, to proceed with carrying concealed in Arizona, while also ensuring they meet all other general eligibility criteria for carrying a concealed weapon in Arizona. Option C. Advise the client that their Nevada concealed weapon permit automatically grants them the right to carry a concealed weapon in Arizona due to reciprocity agreements between states. Option D. Advise the client that they can carry a concealed weapon in Arizona based on their Second Amendment rights, without needing a specific Arizona permit or relying on their Nevada permit. The correct answer is B. Advise the client to confirm if their Nevada concealed weapon permit is recognized by Arizona under ARS Section 13-3112, and if so, to proceed with carrying concealed in Arizona, while also ensuring they meet all other general eligibility criteria for carrying a concealed weapon in Arizona. Explanation. Market research demonstrates that individuals seeking to carry a concealed weapon in Arizona, particularly those who are not residents of the state, often encounter complex regulatory landscapes. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of Arizona Revised Statutes, ARS, concerning concealed carry for non-residents, balancing the applicant's rights with the state's public safety mandates. Misinterpreting these statutes can lead to significant legal repercussions for both the applicant and any advising professional. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with all applicable laws and to provide accurate guidance. The correct approach involves meticulously verifying the applicant eligibility based on ARS Section 13-3112, which specifically outlines the requirements for non-resident concealed weapon permits. This includes confirming that the applicant meets the age requirements, has not been convicted of disqualifying offenses, and possesses a valid concealed weapon permit from their state of residence that is recognized by Arizona. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the statutory framework established by Arizona law for non-resident permits, ensuring that all legal prerequisites are met before advising the applicant on the application process. It prioritizes legal compliance and accurate information dissemination. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a valid permit from another state automatically grants reciprocity for concealed carry in Arizona, without verifying if that state's permit is recognized under ARS Section 13-3112. This fails to acknowledge the specific provisions within Arizona law that govern non-resident permits and reciprocity, potentially leading to an applicant carrying illegally. Another incorrect approach would be to advise the applicant to apply for a resident permit, even if they are not an Arizona resident, based on the belief that it is a simpler process. This is a direct violation of the residency requirements stipulated in ARS Section 13-3112 and could result in the application being denied and potential legal issues for the applicant. Finally, advising an applicant to carry concealed without a permit, citing general Second Amendment rights, without confirming their eligibility for a non-resident permit under Arizona law, ignores the specific statutory requirements for concealed carry in the state, and is a significant legal and ethical failure. Professional reasoning in such situations should involve a systematic review of the relevant statutes, focusing on the specific provisions applicable to the applicant's circumstances, in this case, non-residency. Professionals should consult official state resources and legal counsel if any ambiguity exists. The decision-making process should prioritize accuracy, legal compliance, and the protection of the applicant from legal jeopardy, rather than making assumptions or offering generalized advice. Question 7. Market research demonstrates that individuals seeking financial advice may also have inquiries related to personal safety and legal matters. A client of an Arizona-based financial advisor, who is a resident of California, expresses interest in obtaining a concealed weapon permit in Arizona as a non-resident. The financial advisor is aware that Arizona has specific statutes governing non-resident concealed weapon permits. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible and legally compliant course of action for the financial advisor? Option A. The financial advisor should research Arizona's non-resident concealed weapon permit laws and explain the eligibility criteria and application process to the client based on their understanding. Option B. The financial advisor should clearly state their professional limitations regarding legal and firearm regulations and direct the client to the official Arizona Department of Public Safety website or relevant state agency for accurate information on non-resident concealed weapon permit requirements. Option C. The financial advisor should inform the client that such inquiries are outside the scope of financial advice and refuse to provide any further information or guidance on the matter. Option D. The financial advisor should advise the client based on their personal knowledge or anecdotal experiences of obtaining a non-resident concealed weapon permit in Arizona. The correct answer is B. The financial advisor should clearly state their professional limitations regarding legal and firearm regulations and direct the client to the official Arizona Department of Public Safety website or relevant state agency for accurate information on non-resident concealed weapon permit requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a financial advisor to navigate the complex and evolving landscape of state-specific concealed carry laws while advising a client who is a non-resident of Arizona. The advisor must balance the client's stated desire for information with the advisor's professional obligations and the legal restrictions that may apply. Misinterpreting or misapplying Arizona revised statutes concerning non-resident concealed weapon permits could lead to legal repercussions for both the advisor and the client, as well as damage to the advisor's professional reputation and firm. The advisor must exercise careful judgment to provide accurate, compliant, and ethically sound guidance. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the financial advisor clearly stating their professional limitations and directing the client to the appropriate official sources for information regarding Arizona's non-resident concealed weapon permit requirements. This approach is correct because financial advisors are licensed and regulated to provide advice on financial matters, not on the specifics of firearm laws or permit acquisition. Arizona revised statutes, specifically those pertaining to concealed carry permits for non-residents, are governed by law enforcement agencies and state statutes, not by financial regulatory bodies. By referring the client to the Arizona Department of Public Safety or other official government resources, the advisor upholds their professional scope of practice, avoids providing potentially inaccurate or illegal advice, and ensures the client receives information from the authoritative source. This aligns with ethical obligations to act within one's competence and to avoid misrepresentation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves the financial advisor attempting to interpret and explain the specific eligibility criteria and application process for an Arizona non-resident concealed weapon permit based on their own research or general knowledge. This is professionally unacceptable because it ventures outside the advisor's licensed expertise and could lead to the dissemination of incorrect or outdated information. Financial regulations do not equip advisors to interpret firearm laws, and doing so could violate statutes governing the practice of law or providing legal advice, even if unintentionally. Another incorrect approach is for the financial advisor to dismiss the client's inquiry entirely without offering any guidance on where to find accurate information, while avoiding the provision of incorrect advice. This approach fails to demonstrate professional diligence and client care. It could be perceived as unhelpful and may lead the client to seek information from unreliable sources, potentially putting them at risk. A professional has a responsibility to guide clients toward appropriate resources when their inquiries fall outside the advisor's direct purview. A further incorrect approach would be for the financial advisor to offer a personal opinion or anecdotal experience regarding obtaining a non-resident concealed weapon permit in Arizona. This is professionally unacceptable as it presents subjective information as potentially factual and lacks the authority and accuracy required for legal and regulatory matters. Personal opinions are not a substitute for official legal guidance and can mislead the client. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to their scope of practice, regulatory compliance, and ethical conduct. When faced with a client inquiry that falls outside their expertise, the professional should first identify the boundaries of their license and knowledge. Next, they should determine the appropriate authoritative source for the information the client seeks. Finally, they should clearly communicate their limitations to the client and provide a direct referral to the relevant official agency or resource, ensuring the client receives accurate and legally sound guidance. This process safeguards both the professional and the client. Question 8. The audit findings indicate a potential deficiency in the risk assessment process for non-resident concealed weapons permit applications in Arizona. Considering the requirements outlined in Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-3112, which of the following actions represents the most robust and legally compliant approach to assessing an applicant's eligibility? Option A. Rely primarily on the applicant's self-attested information, assuming that most applicants are truthful and law-abiding, and only flag obvious disqualifiers. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's submitted documentation, cross-referencing it with available public records and law enforcement databases to verify the accuracy and completeness of information provided, and investigate any discrepancies or ambiguous entries. Option C. Perform a superficial review of the application, focusing only on easily identifiable red flags and accepting all other information at face value without further investigation. Option D. Prioritize the speed of permit processing by conducting a minimal review, assuming that the applicant's out-of-state status inherently implies a lower risk profile. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's submitted documentation, cross-referencing it with available public records and law enforcement databases to verify the accuracy and completeness of information provided, and investigate any discrepancies or ambiguous entries. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in risk assessment procedures related to Arizona's non-resident concealed weapons permit process. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's right to privacy and the state's legitimate interest in public safety and adherence to its specific statutory requirements for permit issuance. A thorough risk assessment must go beyond a superficial review and delve into the applicant's history and the implications of any past incidents in relation to Arizona Revised Statutes, A.R.S. Section 13-3112, which governs concealed weapon permits. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive review of the applicant's submitted documentation, cross-referencing it with available public records and law enforcement databases to verify the accuracy and completeness of information provided. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core of risk assessment, identifying potential disqualifying factors as outlined in ARS Section 13-3112(e). This statute enumerates specific prohibitions, such as felony convictions, certain misdemeanor convictions, and documented history of domestic violence, which are crucial for determining eligibility. A thorough verification process ensures that the permit is not issued to individuals who pose a demonstrable risk to public safety, thereby upholding the integrity of the permit system and fulfilling the state's regulatory obligations. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the applicant's self-attestation without independent verification. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the critical due diligence required by the regulatory framework. Arizona law expects a proactive assessment of risk, not a passive acceptance of information. Failing to verify information leaves the state vulnerable to issuing permits to individuals who may be legally disqualified under ARS Section 13-3112(e), creating a significant public safety risk and violating the spirit and letter of the law. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a cursory review of the application, focusing only on easily identifiable red flags without investigating any potentially ambiguous or incomplete information. This is professionally unsound as it fails to adequately assess the totality of the risk. Ambiguous information, if not thoroughly investigated, could mask disqualifying factors. The regulatory framework implicitly requires a diligent inquiry into all aspects of an applicant's background that could impact their eligibility. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of processing over thoroughness, assuming that most applicants are law-abiding. While efficiency is desirable, it cannot come at the expense of public safety and regulatory compliance. This approach is ethically and legally flawed because it prioritizes administrative convenience over the fundamental responsibility to ensure that only qualified individuals receive a concealed weapons permit, as mandated by Arizona law. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the statutory requirements for permit issuance and disqualification. This should be followed by a systematic process of information gathering and verification, employing a risk-based methodology to identify and investigate potential concerns. Any ambiguities or discrepancies should trigger further inquiry, and decisions should be based on a comprehensive assessment of all available information against the legal criteria. The ultimate goal is to ensure public safety while adhering strictly to the established legal framework. Question 9. The audit findings indicate a potential deficiency in the risk assessment process for a non-resident applicant seeking a concealed weapons permit in Arizona. Considering the requirements outlined in Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-3112, which of the following actions best represents a robust risk assessment and adherence to regulatory compliance? Option A. Deny the permit application immediately due to the applicant's non-resident status, without further investigation into their eligibility under Arizona law. Option B. Rely solely on the applicant's statement that they have a legitimate need to carry a concealed weapon in Arizona, without independently verifying their training or checking for disqualifying factors. Option C. Thoroughly verify the authenticity of the applicant's firearms safety training certificate. Confirm their residency status in their home state and cross-reference their information against all disqualifying factors listed in A.R.S. Section 13-3112. Option D. Approve the permit application based on the applicant's self-reported completion of firearms training and a clean basic background check, assuming all other criteria are met. The correct answer is C. Thoroughly verify the authenticity of the applicant's firearms safety training certificate, confirm their residency status in their home state, and cross-reference their information against all disqualifying factors listed in ARS Section 13-3112. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in risk assessment procedures related to Arizona's non-resident concealed weapons permit process. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of Arizona Revised Statutes, ARS. Section 13-3112, which governs concealed weapon permits, and the ethical obligation to ensure all applicants meet the stringent requirements for public safety. The challenge lies in balancing the right to carry a concealed weapon with the state's interest in preventing individuals who pose a risk from obtaining permits. A thorough risk assessment is paramount to uphold these competing interests. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive review of all submitted documentation, cross-referencing information with available databases for any disqualifying factors as outlined in ARS. Section 13-3112, and ensuring the applicant has completed the required firearms safety training from a certified instructor. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the statutory requirements for permit issuance, prioritizing public safety by diligently verifying eligibility and disqualification criteria. It demonstrates a commitment to the spirit and letter of the law, ensuring that only qualified individuals are granted permits. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the applicant's self-attestation, without independent verification of their training certificate's authenticity or their residency status as it pertains to the non-resident permit. This fails to adequately assess the risk, as it bypasses crucial verification steps mandated by the statute and common sense risk management. The regulatory failure here is the omission of due diligence in confirming the validity of submitted credentials, potentially allowing unqualified individuals to obtain permits. Another incorrect approach would be to approve the permit based on a cursory review, assuming that since the applicant has no prior criminal record readily apparent in a basic background check, they meet all other criteria. This overlooks the specific requirements for non-residents, such as demonstrating a legitimate need to carry a concealed weapon in Arizona, which is a key component of the risk assessment for non-resident permits under ARS Section 13-3112. The ethical failure is a lack of thoroughness, which compromises the integrity of the permitting process and public safety. A further incorrect approach would be to deny the permit solely based on the applicant's out-of-state address, without a thorough examination of whether they meet the specific criteria for non-resident permits as defined by Arizona law, such as having a valid permit from their home state or demonstrating a specific reason for carrying in Arizona. This represents a premature judgment and a failure to apply the law correctly, potentially infringing on an applicant's rights without proper cause. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the governing statutes and regulations. This involves systematically reviewing all application components, conducting necessary verifications, and assessing potential risks against established criteria. When in doubt, seeking clarification from supervisors or legal counsel is a critical step in ensuring compliance and upholding professional standards. Question 10. The audit findings indicate that a non-resident applicant for an Arizona Concealed Weapons Permit, CWP, has provided documentation that appears complete on its face. However, the risk assessment process for this applicant involved a calculation to determine the potential risk score based on a weighted system of factors. The applicant's initial score was 75. The risk assessment matrix assigns points as follows: 10 points for each misdemeanor conviction within the last 5 years, 25 points for each felony conviction, and 5 points for each documented instance of mental health adjudication. The applicant has one misdemeanor conviction from 3 years ago and no felony convictions or mental health adjudications. If the standard risk threshold for requiring further investigation in Arizona is a score of 50 or higher, and the applicant's current score is 75, what is the minimum number of points that must be deducted from the applicant's score to bring it below the investigation threshold, assuming only the misdemeanor conviction can be re-evaluated and its points reduced to 0? Option A, 30 points. Option B, 25 points. Option C, 50 points. Option D, 15 points. The correct answer is B, 25 points. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential lapse in the risk assessment process for a non-resident applicant seeking a concealed weapons permit in Arizona. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's right to seek a permit with the state's obligation to ensure public safety through thorough vetting. Misinterpreting or inadequately applying risk assessment principles can lead to either an unwarranted denial of a legitimate applicant's rights or, more critically, the issuance of a permit to an individual who poses a potential risk. Careful judgment is required to navigate the nuances of the Arizona Revised Statutes, ARS, concerning concealed carry permits, particularly ARS Section 13-3112, which outlines the criteria for permit issuance and denial. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive review of all submitted documentation, cross-referencing information with available databases for any disqualifying factors as defined by Arizona law, and applying a standardized risk assessment methodology that quantifies potential risks based on objective criteria. This approach ensures that the decision is grounded in factual evidence and consistent with the statutory requirements for permit issuance, thereby minimizing the risk of both erroneous denial and improper approval. It directly addresses the statutory mandate to assess an applicant's suitability for carrying a concealed weapon. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the applicant's self-reported information without independent verification. This fails to meet the due diligence required by ARS Section 13-3112, as it bypasses critical checks for disqualifying factors such as criminal history or mental health adjudication that are not voluntarily disclosed. Another incorrect approach is to apply a subjective gut feeling or personal bias in the risk assessment. This is ethically unsound and legally indefensible, as decisions must be based on objective criteria outlined in the law, not on personal conjecture, which can lead to discriminatory outcomes and violate the principles of fairness and due process. Finally, an approach that focuses only on the completeness of the application form without scrutinizing the substance of the information provided is also flawed. While a complete application is necessary, it does not guarantee the applicant's eligibility under Arizona law. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to statutory requirements, objective data analysis, and consistent application of risk assessment protocols. This involves understanding the specific disqualifiers outlined in ARS Section 13-3112, utilizing available investigative tools to verify applicant information, and documenting the entire risk assessment process thoroughly. When faced with ambiguous information, seeking clarification or further investigation is paramount, rather than making assumptions or proceeding with incomplete data. Question 11. Operational review demonstrates that an applicant for an Arizona non-resident concealed weapons permit has submitted a valid concealed weapon permit from their home state, along with a completed application form and proof of a firearm safety course. What is the most appropriate next step to ensure compliance with Arizona Revised Statutes Section 13-3112? Option A. Independently verify the applicant's eligibility against all requirements of Arizona Revised Statutes Section 13-3112, including confirming the specific terms of reciprocity with the applicant's home state and ensuring the firearm safety course meets Arizona's standards. Option B. Contact the applicant's home state law enforcement agency to confirm the validity of their existing permit and inquire about their residency status. Option C. Immediately approve the permit based on the applicant's valid permit from their home state, assuming reciprocity covers all requirements. Option D. Proceed with issuing the permit after confirming the applicant's age and that they have completed a firearms safety course, without further verification of reciprocity or specific Arizona residency requirements for non-residents. The correct answer is A. Independently verify the applicant's eligibility against all requirements of Arizona Revised Statutes Section 13-3112, including confirming the specific terms of reciprocity with the applicant's home state and ensuring the firearms safety course meets Arizona's standards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a non-resident applicant to navigate Arizona's specific concealed weapon permit requirements, which may differ significantly from their home state's laws. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the applicant's eligibility and ensuring all documentation meets Arizona's statutory mandates, particularly concerning reciprocity and the definition of resident for permit purposes. A failure to do so could result in the denial of a legitimate application or, worse, the issuance of a permit to an ineligible individual, posing a public safety risk and violating regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documentation against Arizona Revised Statutes, A.R.S. Section 13-3112, specifically focusing on the definition of residency for non-residents seeking a permit. This includes verifying that the applicant meets the age requirement, has not been disqualified by any of the statutory prohibitions, and has provided proof of completion of a firearms safety course as required by A.R.S. Section 13-3112d. Crucially, it requires confirming that the applicant's home state has a reciprocal agreement with Arizona for concealed weapon permits, or that the applicant meets the specific criteria for non-resident permits as outlined in the statute, ensuring compliance with the spirit and letter of Arizona law regarding who can carry a concealed weapon within the state. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that because the applicant holds a valid concealed weapon permit from their home state, it automatically qualifies them for an Arizona permit under reciprocity, without independently verifying the specific terms of that reciprocity agreement, or if the applicant's home state permit is recognized under A.R.S. Section 13-3112. This bypasses the statutory requirement to ensure the applicant meets Arizona's independent eligibility criteria. Another incorrect approach is to overlook the statutory definition of resident as it applies to non-residents seeking a permit, potentially misinterpreting the applicant's intent or ties to Arizona. This could lead to approving an application that does not align with the legislative intent behind non-resident permit issuance. A third incorrect approach is to solely rely on the applicant's self-attestation of meeting all requirements without independently verifying the submitted documentation against the statutory mandates, such as checking for disqualifying criminal history or ensuring the firearms safety course meets Arizona's specific standards. This abdication of due diligence creates a significant compliance risk. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a systematic and diligent approach. This involves understanding the specific statutory requirements of Arizona Revised Statutes Section 13-3112 for both resident and non-resident concealed weapon permits. When reviewing an application, the process should begin with a clear understanding of the applicant's status, resident vs. non-resident, and then meticulously cross-reference all submitted documentation against each statutory requirement. This includes verifying identity, age, residency, as defined by Arizona law for non-residents, absence of disqualifying factors, and proof of adequate firearms training. If reciprocity is involved, the specific terms of the interstate agreement must be confirmed. This methodical, evidence-based review ensures compliance and upholds public safety. Question 12. Benchmark analysis indicates that a non-resident applicant has submitted an application for an Arizona concealed weapons permit, presenting a valid concealed weapon permit from their home state of California and stating they have completed a firearms safety course in California. What is the most appropriate risk assessment approach for an Arizona licensing official to take regarding this application? Option A. Thoroughly review the applicant's submitted documentation against the specific requirements of Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-3112, verifying proof of non-residency, the adequacy of their firearms training as it pertains to Arizona's standards, and confirming they meet all other statutory eligibility criteria for an Arizona non-resident permit. Option B. Grant the permit based on the applicant's assurance that they meet all Arizona requirements, as their existing permit from another state implies a level of vetting. Option C. Issue the Arizona concealed weapons permit based on the applicant's valid California concealed weapon permit, assuming reciprocity covers the permit issuance process itself. Option D. Accept the applicant's statement of completing a firearms safety course in California as sufficient without further verification, given that California has its own training requirements. The correct answer is A. Thoroughly review the applicant's submitted documentation against the specific requirements of Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-3112, verifying proof of non-residency, the adequacy of their firearms training as it pertains to Arizona's standards, and confirming they meet all other statutory eligibility criteria for an Arizona non-resident permit. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a non-resident applicant to navigate Arizona's specific concealed weapon permit requirements, which may differ significantly from their home state's laws. The core challenge lies in accurately assessing the applicant's eligibility and ensuring compliance with Arizona Revised Statutes, A.R.S. Section 13-3112, which governs concealed weapon permits, particularly concerning residency and reciprocity. A failure to correctly interpret these statutes can lead to the denial of a legitimate application or, worse, the issuance of a permit to an ineligible individual, posing a significant public safety risk. Careful judgment is required to balance the applicant's rights with the state's interest in public safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves thoroughly reviewing the applicant's submitted documentation against the specific requirements outlined in A.R.S. Section 13-3112. This includes verifying proof of non-residency, ensuring the applicant meets all age and training prerequisites, and confirming they are not disqualified due to any criminal history or other statutory prohibitions. The correct approach emphasizes diligent adherence to the established legal framework for permit issuance, ensuring that only those who meet all statutory criteria are granted a permit. This aligns with the ethical obligation to uphold the law and protect public safety by ensuring the permit process is administered fairly and accurately according to Arizona's legislative intent. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that because the applicant holds a valid concealed weapon permit from another state, Arizona will automatically recognize it for the purpose of issuing a non-resident permit without a separate application and review process. This fails to acknowledge that Arizona's non-resident permit issuance is governed by its own statutes and does not solely rely on reciprocity agreements for the permit itself, but rather for the carrying of a concealed weapon. This approach bypasses the statutory requirement for a specific Arizona non-resident permit application and review. Another incorrect approach is to overlook the specific training requirements mandated by A.R.S. Section 13-3112 for non-resident applicants. While many states have similar training, Arizona's statute may have particular nuances regarding the type or duration of approved training. Failing to verify that the applicant's training meets these precise Arizona standards is a regulatory failure, as it could lead to issuing a permit to someone who has not demonstrated the required proficiency or knowledge under Arizona law. A further incorrect approach is to grant the permit based on a verbal assurance from the applicant that they meet all requirements, without requiring and verifying the necessary supporting documentation. This bypasses the fundamental principle of due diligence in administrative processes and opens the door to potential fraud or misrepresentation, directly contravening the statutory mandate for documented proof of eligibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a systematic approach. First, clearly identify the governing statutes and regulations for the specific jurisdiction, Arizona, in this case. Second, meticulously review all submitted documentation against each specific requirement of the relevant statute, A.R.S. Section 13-3112. Third, if any aspect of the application is unclear or incomplete, seek clarification and additional documentation from the applicant, adhering strictly to the established procedures. Finally, maintain a clear audit trail of all decisions and the supporting evidence, ensuring transparency and accountability in the permit issuance process. This structured decision-making process ensures compliance with legal mandates and upholds professional integrity. Question 13. The audit findings indicate a need to refine the risk assessment process for non-resident concealed weapon permit applications in Arizona. Considering the requirements of Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-3112, which of the following approaches best mitigates the risk of issuing permits to unqualified individuals while respecting applicant rights? Option A. Expedite the processing of non-resident applications by conducting only a superficial review of submitted documentation to ensure timely issuance. Option B. Require non-resident applicants to complete a new, Arizona-specific firearms safety course, even if they possess a valid permit from their home state with comparable training. Option C. Accept the applicant's self-attestation of holding a valid out-of-state permit and completing equivalent training without independent verification. Option D. Implement a documented risk assessment protocol that verifies the applicant's out-of-state concealed weapon permit or equivalent training and confirms their adherence to Arizona's eligibility criteria through independent checks. The correct answer is D. Implement a documented risk assessment protocol that verifies the applicant's out-of-state concealed weapon permit or equivalent training and confirms their adherence to Arizona's eligibility criteria through independent checks. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in risk assessment procedures related to Arizona's non-resident concealed weapons permit application process. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's right to privacy and the need for thorough due diligence by the permitting authority. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks associated with non-resident applicants without imposing undue burdens or violating established legal frameworks. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with Arizona Revised Statutes, A.R.S. Section 13-3112, which governs concealed weapon permits, particularly concerning the verification of out-of-state qualifications and the applicant's eligibility. The best professional practice involves a systematic and documented risk assessment that prioritizes verification of the applicant's out-of-state concealed weapon permit or equivalent training and their adherence to Arizona's eligibility criteria. This approach ensures that the permitting authority fulfills its statutory duty to issue permits only to qualified individuals while respecting the applicant's rights. Specifically, it aligns with the spirit of A.R.S. Section 13-3112, E.1, which allows for the recognition of permits from other states if those states have substantially similar requirements. A robust risk assessment would involve cross-referencing the applicant's provided documentation with official records from their home state, verifying the validity and equivalence of their training, and confirming they meet all Arizona eligibility requirements, such as age and criminal history. This methodical process minimizes the risk of issuing a permit to an unqualified individual and avoids arbitrary denial. An approach that relies solely on the applicant's self-certification without independent verification of their out-of-state permit or training is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a significant regulatory oversight, as it bypasses the critical step of confirming the applicant's qualifications, as required by ARS Section 13-3112(e)(1). It creates a substantial risk of issuing a permit to someone who may not meet the underlying standards of their home state or Arizona's eligibility criteria, thereby undermining public safety. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to impose additional, non-statutory training requirements on non-resident applicants that are not mandated by Arizona law for residents. This practice exceeds the authority granted by ARS Section 13-3112 and could be construed as discriminatory or an undue burden, potentially leading to legal challenges. The law specifies recognition of equivalent out-of-state permits and training, not the imposition of new, arbitrary requirements. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed of processing over thoroughness, leading to a cursory review of an applicant's qualifications, is also professionally deficient. While efficiency is desirable, it cannot come at the expense of due diligence. A superficial review increases the likelihood of overlooking disqualifying factors, thereby failing to uphold the public safety mandate inherent in the permitting process and violating the spirit of ARS Section 13-3112. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the governing statutes and regulations. This involves identifying all mandatory verification steps and risk factors. Next, they should develop a standardized risk assessment protocol that is applied consistently to all applicants. This protocol should outline the specific documentation required, the methods for verification, and the criteria for determining eligibility. Regular training and internal audits are essential to ensure adherence to the protocol and to adapt to any changes in law or best practices. Question 14. Strategic planning requires an individual applying for a non-resident concealed weapons permit in Arizona to meticulously assess their eligibility and the legal landscape. Considering the Arizona revised statutes governing concealed weapon permits, which of the following approaches best ensures compliance and minimizes risk? Option A. Focus primarily on federal laws regarding firearm ownership and possession, as these are the overarching regulations that govern all firearm-related activities, including concealed carry permits. Option B. Thoroughly research Arizona revised statute section 13-3112 to confirm all eligibility requirements for non-residents, including age, firearm possession prohibitions, firearms training, and the existence of reciprocity or recognition with the applicant's home state's permit laws, while also verifying the applicant's legal right to carry in their home state. Option C. Assume that a valid concealed weapon permit issued by the applicant's home state automatically satisfies Arizona's requirements for a non-resident permit due to general interstate recognition principles. Option D. Rely on information obtained from online forums and discussions with other permit holders to understand Arizona's non-resident permit application process and requirements. The correct answer is B. Thoroughly research Arizona revised statute section 13-3112 to confirm all eligibility requirements for non-residents, including age, firearm possession prohibitions, firearms training, and the existence of reciprocity or recognition with the applicant's home state's permit laws, while also verifying the applicant's legal right to carry in their home state. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual seeking a non-resident concealed weapons permit in Arizona to navigate the complexities of interstate reciprocity and Arizona's specific statutory requirements, while also being mindful of potential conflicts with their home state's laws. The risk lies in misinterpreting or failing to comply with the legal framework, which could lead to permit denial, legal repercussions, or even endangerment. Careful judgment is required to ensure all conditions are met. The best professional approach involves a thorough understanding of Arizona revised statutes, ARS, section 13-3112, which governs concealed weapon permits for non-residents. This approach prioritizes verifying that the applicant meets all eligibility criteria, including being at least 21 years of age, not being prohibited from possessing a firearm under state or federal law, and completing a firearm safety course or demonstrating proficiency. Crucially, it also necessitates confirming that the applicant's home state has a reciprocal agreement with Arizona or that Arizona recognizes permits issued by the applicant's home state, and that the applicant is legally permitted to carry a concealed weapon in their home state. This proactive verification ensures compliance with Arizona law and minimizes the risk of future legal issues. An incorrect approach would be to assume that simply possessing a valid concealed weapon permit from one's home state automatically qualifies them for an Arizona non-resident permit. This fails to acknowledge that Arizona has its own specific statutory requirements, and that reciprocity is not always a blanket agreement. It overlooks the critical step of verifying Arizona's specific eligibility criteria and the nuances of interstate recognition. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on the federal legality of firearm possession without adequately addressing Arizona's state-specific licensing requirements for concealed carry. While federal law sets baseline prohibitions, state laws dictate the licensing and permit process for concealed weapons. This approach neglects the specific regulatory framework established by Arizona for non-resident permits. A further incorrect approach would be to rely on informal advice or anecdotal information regarding Arizona's non-resident permit requirements, rather than consulting the official statutes and guidelines. This can lead to significant misunderstandings and noncompliance, as informal sources may be outdated, inaccurate, or incomplete. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of the relevant jurisdiction statutes and administrative rules. This includes identifying all eligibility criteria, understanding any reciprocity agreements or lack thereof, and confirming compliance with both the issuing state's laws and the applicant's home state laws. When in doubt, seeking clarification from the issuing authority or legal counsel is paramount. Question 15. The performance metrics show a significant number of applications for Arizona non-resident concealed weapons permits are being denied due to incomplete or inaccurate information regarding eligibility and reciprocity. Considering Arizona Revised Statutes Title 13, Chapter 4, what is the most prudent approach for an individual residing in Nevada who wishes to obtain an Arizona non-resident concealed weapons permit to ensure their application is compliant and likely to be approved? Option A. Thoroughly research Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-3112 and the Arizona Department of Public Safety's official guidelines for non-resident concealed weapon permits, ensuring all eligibility criteria, including age, firearm possession legality, and required training, are met, and understanding Arizona's reciprocity with Nevada. Option B. Rely on information shared in online firearm enthusiast forums and discussions to understand the application process and requirements for Arizona non-resident permits. Option C. Focus primarily on federal laws governing firearm ownership and assume that compliance with federal regulations will satisfy Arizona's requirements for a non-resident permit. Option D. Assume that a valid concealed weapons permit issued by the state of Nevada is sufficient for carrying concealed in Arizona, as Nevada is a neighboring state with similar firearm laws. The correct answer is A. Thoroughly research Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-3112 and the Arizona Department of Public Safety's official guidelines for non-resident concealed weapon permits, ensuring all eligibility criteria, including age, firearm possession legality, and required training, are met, and understanding Arizona's reciprocity with Nevada. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual seeking a non-resident concealed weapons permit in Arizona to navigate the complexities of interstate reciprocity and Arizona's specific statutory requirements for permit issuance. The challenge lies in accurately assessing one's eligibility and understanding the limitations and responsibilities associated with carrying a concealed weapon in Arizona as a non-resident, particularly when the applicant's home state may have different laws. Misinterpreting these requirements can lead to legal repercussions and the denial of a permit. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves thoroughly researching Arizona Revised Statutes, ARS, Title 13, Chapter 4, specifically focusing on ARS Section 13-3112, which governs concealed weapon permits. This includes understanding the eligibility criteria for non-residents, such as being at least 21 years of age, not being prohibited from possessing a firearm under state or federal law, and completing a firearm safety or training course. It also necessitates understanding the reciprocity agreements Arizona has with other states and how those might affect the recognition of permits or the application process for non-residents. A comprehensive review of the Arizona Department of Public Safety, DPS, website for non-resident application procedures and required documentation is crucial. This approach ensures adherence to all legal mandates and maximizes the likelihood of a successful and lawful application. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that a valid concealed weapons permit from one's home state automatically grants the right to carry concealed in Arizona without further inquiry. This fails to acknowledge that Arizona has its own specific statutory requirements for issuing permits to non-residents, and that reciprocity is not always a blanket endorsement of all out-of-state permits. This approach risks violating Arizona law by carrying without a valid Arizona permit or a permit recognized under specific reciprocity agreements. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on informal advice from online forums or individuals without verifying the information against official Arizona statutes and DPS guidance. Such sources may be outdated, inaccurate, or misinterpreted, leading to a misunderstanding of eligibility criteria or application procedures. This can result in submitting an incomplete application or attempting to meet requirements that are not legally mandated, potentially leading to denial and wasted effort. A further incorrect approach is to focus only on federal firearm laws and disregard Arizona's specific state-level requirements for concealed weapon permits. While federal law sets baseline prohibitions, each state has the authority to regulate the carrying of concealed weapons within its borders, including establishing its own permitting process and eligibility standards for non-residents. Overlooking Arizona's specific statutes, such as those pertaining to residency, age, and training, would be a significant regulatory failure. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing this situation should adopt a systematic approach. First, identify the governing jurisdiction, Arizona. Second, determine the specific legal framework, Arizona Revised Statutes, particularly Title 13, Chapter 4. Third, consult official sources for guidance, Arizona DPS website relevant statutes. Fourth, meticulously review eligibility requirements for the applicant's status, non-resident. Fifth, understand the implications of reciprocity and any specific agreements. Finally, ensure all documentation and training meet the precise requirements of Arizona law before proceeding with an application. This methodical process minimizes risk and ensures compliance. Question 16. The evaluation methodology shows that when reviewing an Arizona non-resident concealed weapon permit application, what is the most prudent risk assessment approach to ensure compliance with Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-3112 and federal firearms regulations? Option A. Prioritize the speed of processing the application, forming only a superficial check of the submitted documents to expedite the issuance of permits. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of all submitted application materials, cross-reference applicant information with relevant federal and state databases for any disqualifying factors, and meticulously verify residency documentation as required by Arizona law. Option C. Focus solely on the applicant's stated intent for carrying a concealed weapon, disregarding any potential discrepancies or disqualifying information found in background checks if the stated intent appears lawful. Option D. Accept the applicant's provided information at face value, assuming all details are accurate and complete, and proceed with permit issuance if the basic application form is filled out. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of all submitted application materials, cross-reference applicant information with relevant federal and state databases for any disqualifying factors, and meticulously verify residency documentation as required by Arizona law. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that assessing the risk associated with a non-resident's application for a concealed weapon permit in Arizona requires a nuanced understanding of both federal and state legal frameworks, as well as the applicant's specific circumstances. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves balancing the applicant's Second Amendment rights with the state's legitimate interest in public safety and preventing the misuse of firearms. A thorough risk assessment must go beyond a simple background check to identify potential red flags that might indicate a heightened risk of violence or unlawful possession. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of all submitted documentation, cross-referencing information with relevant databases, and considering any specific circumstances presented by the applicant that might warrant further scrutiny. This includes verifying the applicant's residency status as per Arizona Revised Statutes, A.R.S. Section 13-3112, which outlines the requirements for non-resident permits, and ensuring compliance with federal firearms laws, such as the Gun Control Act of 1968, as amended. The ethical and legal imperative is to uphold the law while ensuring that permits are issued only to individuals who meet all statutory qualifications and do not pose a demonstrable risk. An approach that relies solely on a cursory review of the application form, without verifying the accuracy of the provided information, or considering the implications of any disclosed information, is professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct due diligence could lead to the issuance of a permit to an unqualified individual, violating ARS Section 13-3112 and potentially endangering public safety. Similarly, an approach that dismisses concerns raised by discrepancies in the application or by information obtained through background checks based on a presumption of good faith without independent verification is also flawed. This overlooks the regulatory requirement to ensure the applicant is not prohibited from possessing a firearm under state or federal law. Finally, an approach that prioritizes expediency over thoroughness, leading to a rushed assessment that misses critical disqualifying factors, is a direct contravention of the professional duty to conduct a diligent and lawful risk assessment. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific legal requirements of Arizona for non-resident concealed weapon permits. This framework should include a systematic review of all application components, a thorough background investigation utilizing all available legal means, and a critical evaluation of any information that suggests a potential risk. The process should be documented meticulously, with clear justifications for any decisions made, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 17. Regulatory review indicates a non-resident applicant is seeking an Arizona concealed weapons permit, claiming they have a valid permit from their home state and have visited Arizona frequently. What is the primary risk assessment consideration for determining the applicant's eligibility under Arizona Revised Statutes Section 13-3112? Option A. Confirming the applicant's out-of-state concealed weapons permit is recognized under Arizona's reciprocity agreements. Option B. Evaluating the applicant's familiarity with Arizona's firearm laws based on their stated visits. Option C. Verifying the applicant meets Arizona's statutory definition of a resident or is stationed in Arizona under military orders, supported by the required documentation. Option D. Accepting the applicant's statement of frequent visits to Arizona as sufficient evidence of their connection to the state. The correct answer is C. Verifying the applicant meets Arizona's statutory definition of a resident or is stationed in Arizona under military orders, supported by the required documentation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a non-resident applicant for an Arizona Concealed Weapons Permit, CWP, to navigate the specific requirements of Arizona law while potentially being subject to the laws of their home state. Misinterpreting or failing to adhere to Arizona's statutory requirements, particularly concerning reciprocity and the definition of resident, could lead to the denial of the permit, or worse, legal repercussions if the applicant acts under a mistaken belief about their permit's validity. The risk assessment here involves understanding the applicant's current residency status and ensuring their application aligns precisely with Arizona Revised Statutes, A.R.S. Section 13-3112. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves thoroughly reviewing the applicant's provided documentation to confirm they meet Arizona's definition of a resident for the purpose of obtaining a concealed weapons permit, as outlined in ARS Section 13-3112A. 1. This statute requires the applicant to be a resident of Arizona or to be stationed in Arizona under military orders. The applicant must demonstrate this residency through specific means, such as a valid Arizona driver's license, a voter registration card, or evidence of property ownership in Arizona, alongside their application. A careful assessment of the provided documents against these statutory criteria ensures compliance and mitigates the risk of an improper issuance or denial. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that simply possessing a valid concealed weapons permit from another state automatically grants eligibility for an Arizona permit, without verifying Arizona's specific residency requirements. This fails to acknowledge that Arizona's reciprocity agreements, as detailed in ARS Section 13-3112P, allow for recognition of permits from other states, but do not waive the fundamental requirement for an applicant seeking an Arizona permit to establish Arizona residency or military stationing, as per ARS Section 13-3112A1. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the applicant's verbal assertion of residency without demanding the legally prescribed documentary evidence. Arizona law requires specific documentation to prove residency for CWP applicants. Accepting a verbal claim without substantiation bypasses the statutory safeguards designed to ensure the integrity of the permitting process and could lead to the issuance of a permit to an unqualified individual. A further incorrect approach is to interpret non-resident, in the context of the permit application, as meaning the applicant is not a resident of Arizona, but is applying for a permit that would be recognized in other states. This misunderstands the core requirement of ARS Section 13-3112A1, which mandates that an applicant for an Arizona CWP must be a resident of Arizona or stationed there under military orders. The permit itself may have reciprocity, but the applicant's status for obtaining it is strictly defined by Arizona law. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with reviewing concealed weapons permit applications must adopt a systematic risk assessment process. This begins with a thorough understanding of the governing statutes, in this case, Arizona Revised Statutes Section 13-3112. The process should involve 1. Identifying the applicant's stated status resident, non-resident, military. 2. Cross-referencing this status with the explicit legal definitions and requirements of Arizona law. 3. Demanding and meticulously verifying the specific documentary evidence mandated by statute to support the claimed status. 4. Recognizing the limitations and conditions of reciprocity agreements, ensuring they do not override fundamental eligibility criteria for obtaining an Arizona permit. This structured approach ensures legal compliance, upholds public safety, and protects the integrity of the permitting process. Question 18. Performance analysis shows that an applicant seeking a non-resident concealed weapons permit in Arizona has obtained a concealed carry permit in their home state, which has a reciprocity agreement with Arizona. However, the applicant's home state training course was less comprehensive than the curriculum mandated by Arizona Revised Statutes Section 13-3112. Considering the risk assessment for obtaining the Arizona permit, which of the following actions best mitigates potential regulatory and legal challenges? Option A. The applicant should contact the Arizona Department of Public Safety to inquire if their home state's training is sufficient, without proactively seeking an Arizona-approved course. Option B. The applicant should complete an Arizona-approved firearms safety or training course that meets the specific requirements outlined in Arizona Revised Statutes Section 13-3112. In addition to ensuring their application package is complete and accurate according to Arizona's standards. Option C. The applicant should submit their home state permit and training certificate, believing that the reciprocity agreement negates the need to meet Arizona's specific training mandates for non-residents. Option D. The applicant should rely on their existing home state permit and the reciprocity agreement, assuming Arizona will automatically recognize their training and permit without further action. The correct answer is B. The applicant should complete an Arizona-approved firearms safety or training course that meets the specific requirements outlined in Arizona Revised Statutes Section 13-3112, in addition to ensuring their application package is complete and accurate according to Arizona's standards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant for a non-resident concealed weapons permit in Arizona to navigate the complexities of interstate recognition of permits and understand the specific requirements that may differ from their home state. The core challenge lies in ensuring full compliance with Arizona Revised Statutes, ARS, Section 13-3112, which governs concealed carry permits, particularly for non-residents, while also considering the applicant's home state laws and the potential for misunderstandings regarding reciprocity. Failure to accurately assess and meet these requirements could lead to permit denial, or worse, legal repercussions if the applicant carries a concealed weapon without a valid permit. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves meticulously reviewing Arizona's specific requirements for non-resident concealed weapons permits, including any training mandates, application procedures, and background check protocols, as outlined in ARS Section 13-3112. This includes verifying if Arizona has reciprocity agreements with the applicant's home state and understanding the implications of such agreements. The applicant must then ensure their training and application materials precisely meet Arizona's standards, even if their home state has less stringent requirements. This approach is correct because it prioritizes direct compliance with the laws of the jurisdiction where the permit is sought, thereby minimizing legal risk and ensuring the permit is issued based on a thorough understanding of Arizona's regulatory framework. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that a concealed weapons permit issued by the applicant's home state automatically grants them the right to carry a concealed weapon in Arizona, or that Arizona will automatically recognize it without meeting Arizona's specific non-resident application requirements. This fails to acknowledge that Arizona has its own statutory requirements for issuing permits, as detailed in ARS Section 13-3112, and that reciprocity is a matter of agreement and specific conditions, not an automatic entitlement. Relying solely on home state recognition without verifying Arizona's explicit non-resident provisions is a significant regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach is to only consider the training requirements of the applicant's home state, believing it will be sufficient for Arizona. Arizona Revised Statutes Section 13-3112 outlines specific training requirements for concealed carry permits, and these may differ from those in other states. If the applicant's home state training does not meet or exceed Arizona's mandated curriculum, their application will likely be denied, or they may be found to be carrying unlawfully if they assume their training is adequate. This demonstrates a failure to adhere to the specific statutory mandates of Arizona. Third incorrect approach is to submit an application based on a general understanding of concealed carry laws without consulting the most current version of Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-3112 and any accompanying administrative rules or guidance from the Arizona Department of Public Safety. Laws and regulations can change, and relying on outdated or generalized information can lead to errors in the application process, such as missing required documentation or failing to meet eligibility criteria. This approach risks noncompliance due to a lack of diligence in seeking accurate, jurisdiction-specific information. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to permit applications, beginning with identifying the specific jurisdiction's laws governing the permit. This involves consulting the official statutes and regulations of that jurisdiction. In this case, Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-3112, and any relevant administrative guidance. The next step is to compare these requirements against the applicant's qualifications and documentation, identifying any gaps. The professional then guides the applicant in fulfilling all specific requirements, prioritizing direct compliance with the target jurisdiction's laws over assumptions based on other jurisdictions. This ensures a robust and legally sound application process. Question 19. Quality control measures reveal that a financial advisor is consulting with a client who is a resident of Nevada and holds a valid concealed weapon permit issued by the state of Nevada. The client wishes to obtain an Arizona non-resident concealed weapons permit and asks the advisor for guidance on the process, stating they believe their Nevada permit should automatically allow them to carry concealed in Arizona. What is the most appropriate course of action for the financial advisor to take regarding the client's request for guidance on obtaining an Arizona non-resident concealed weapons permit? Option A. Provide the client with a general checklist of common concealed carry requirements, omitting specific Arizona statutes and reciprocity details, and assure them that their Nevada permit is likely sufficient. Option B. Inform the client that Arizona law generally allows non-residents to carry concealed weapons if they have a permit from their home state, without verifying specific reciprocity agreements or Arizona's statutory requirements for non-residents. Option C. Provide the client with the official application forms for an Arizona non-resident concealed weapons permit. Direct them to the Arizona Department of Public Safety website for detailed instructions and statutory requirements, and explain that Arizona law, specifically ARS Section 13-3112, governs non-resident permits and that reciprocity must be verified. Option D. Advise the client that their valid Nevada concealed weapon permit is sufficient for carrying concealed in Arizona due to reciprocity, and no further action is needed. The correct answer is C. Provide the client with the official application forms for an Arizona non-resident concealed weapons permit. Direct them to the Arizona Department of Public Safety website for detailed instructions and statutory requirements, and explain that Arizona law, specifically ARS Section 13-3112, governs non-resident permits and that reciprocity must be verified. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a non-resident applicant to navigate Arizona's specific concealed weapon permit (CWP) requirements, which differ from their home state's laws. The core challenge lies in ensuring full compliance with Arizona revised statutes, ARS, Title 13, Chapter 31, specifically ARS Section 13-3112, which governs concealed weapon permits, while also respecting the reciprocity agreements and the applicant's understanding of their home state's regulations. Failure to accurately assess the applicant's eligibility under Arizona law, or to provide clear, legally sound advice, could lead to the applicant unknowingly violating Arizona law or being denied a permit based on incomplete or inaccurate information. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough review of the applicant's eligibility based on Arizona's statutory requirements for non-residents, as outlined in ARS Section 13-3112. This includes verifying that the applicant meets all the criteria for a permit, such as age, residency status, as defined for non-residents seeking a permit, and absence of disqualifying factors, e.g., felony convictions, certain misdemeanor convictions, mental health adjudications. Crucially, it requires confirming that the applicant's home state permit is recognized under Arizona's reciprocity provisions, or that they otherwise qualify for an Arizona permit. Providing the applicant with the official application forms and directing them to the relevant sections of the Arizona Department of Public Safety, DPS, website for detailed instructions and statutory references is the most legally sound and ethically responsible approach. This ensures the applicant receives accurate, official guidance and can complete the application process correctly. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that because the applicant holds a valid concealed weapon permit in their home state, it automatically grants them the right to carry concealed in Arizona without an Arizona permit or specific reciprocity recognition. Arizona law, as detailed in ARS Section 13-3102, outlines when a non-resident may carry a concealed weapon without an Arizona permit, which is distinct from obtaining a permit. Relying solely on the home state permit without verifying Arizona's specific reciprocity agreements or the applicant's eligibility for an Arizona permit is a significant legal oversight. Another incorrect approach is to provide the applicant with a simplified checklist of requirements based on general knowledge of concealed carry laws, without consulting the specific statutes and administrative rules governing Arizona non-resident permits. This can lead to omissions of critical eligibility criteria or procedural steps mandated by ARS Section 13-3112, potentially resulting in an incomplete or invalid application, or the applicant misunderstanding their legal standing in Arizona. A third incorrect approach is to advise the applicant that their home state permit is sufficient for carrying concealed in Arizona, without first confirming the existence and scope of any reciprocity agreement between Arizona and their home state. Arizona's reciprocity is governed by specific statutes and agreements, and assuming reciprocity without verification is a direct violation of the principle of adhering to specific jurisdictional laws. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a systematic approach rooted in statutory compliance and ethical duty to inform. This involves 1. Identifying the specific jurisdiction and its relevant laws, Arizona Revised Statutes, Title 13, Chapter 31. 2. Understanding the applicant's status non-resident and their existing credentials, home state permit. 3. Consulting the precise statutory provisions governing non-resident permits and reciprocity. A. R. S. Section 13-3112 and related reciprocity statutes. 4. Providing accurate, official information and directing the applicant to the appropriate state agency for application materials and further guidance. 5. Avoiding assumptions and generalizations about concealed carry laws, as these vary significantly by state. Question 20. The monitoring system demonstrates that a non-resident applicant for an Arizona concealed weapons permit has a 15% probability of having a prior misdemeanor conviction that was not disclosed, a 10% probability of having a history of documented domestic disputes, and a 5% probability of having a history of substance abuse. Each of these factors, if present, carries a risk multiplier of 3 for potential noncompliance. If an applicant has none of these disclosed issues, their baseline risk score is 0. Calculate the applicant's total risk score based on the following. The applicant has a prior misdemeanor conviction that was not disclosed, but no history of domestic disputes or substance abuse. Option A, 15. Option B, 30. Option C, 45. Option D, 25. The correct answer is C, 45. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent risk associated with assessing the potential for future noncompliance with Arizona's concealed weapon permit laws, particularly for non-residents. The core difficulty lies in quantifying and mitigating this risk based on limited information and predictive factors, requiring a nuanced understanding of both statistical probabilities and the spirit of the law. Careful judgment is essential to avoid both overly punitive measures that could unfairly penalize individuals and insufficient measures that could compromise public safety. The best approach involves a statistically grounded risk assessment that prioritizes verifiable data and objective indicators of potential noncompliance. This method correctly involves calculating the weighted risk score by applying the specified probabilities to the identified risk factors and summing these weighted scores. This is correct because it directly aligns with the principles of risk management by quantifying potential threats based on established likelihoods and impacts. It adheres to the regulatory framework by focusing on objective, measurable criteria that are relevant to assessing an applicant's suitability for a non-resident permit, thereby promoting public safety without resorting to arbitrary or discriminatory practices. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on subjective interpretations of an applicant's demeanor or general background without concrete, quantifiable risk factors. This fails to meet regulatory requirements for objective assessment and introduces bias, potentially leading to unfair denial of permits based on unfounded assumptions rather than demonstrable risk. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the probabilistic nature of the risk factors and simply add the raw percentages of each identified risk. This fundamentally misunderstands risk assessment by failing to account for the varying likelihoods of each factor occurring, leading to an inaccurate and potentially misleading overall risk score. It does not provide a sound basis for decision-making, as it does not reflect the true probability of combined risks. A third incorrect approach would be to exclude any risk factors that have a low individual probability, even if they are serious in nature. This is flawed because it neglects the cumulative effect of multiple low-probability, high-impact events. Effective risk assessment requires considering all relevant factors, even those with lower individual likelihoods, as their combined occurrence can still represent a significant risk. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly identifying all potential risk factors relevant to the specific regulatory context, Arizona concealed weapon permit laws for non-residents. 2. Assigning objective probabilities to each identified risk factor based on available data or established statistical models. 3. Determining a weighting or impact score for each risk factor based on its potential severity. 4. Calculating a weighted risk score for each applicant by multiplying the probability by the impact score for each factor and summing these values. 5. Establishing clear thresholds for risk acceptance, mitigation, or denial based on the calculated scores, ensuring these thresholds are consistently applied and justifiable. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment methodology to incorporate new data and evolving regulatory understanding.